What's up, good people? My name is AJ, and you are watching Straight Talks. The topic of this video is going to be a bit of a rant on human psychology and relation to a question that I've received a couple times now, not in comments to my videos, but actually in personal questions that I've received since having had this YouTube channel around from people who have learned about me on YouTube, saying, hey, I want to get into finance, but I'm dealing with this certain issue, or hey, I'm already in finance and dealing with this certain issue. And that issue is people treating other people poorly in the finance industry, or kind of having that finance bro mentality. Now, of course, people treat people poorly in all walks of life and other industries too, not just finance, but we certainly know that it's very prevalent in the finance industry, especially in certain sectors of the industry, which I'm going to talk about here. And I'm not a human psychologist, but I'm going to share a little bit of my thoughts on why this happens, what to do if it's happening to you, and what you should do if you're treating other people poorly because of the reasons that I'll mention. But it's just so common in the finance sector that without having have worked full-time in other sectors of the economy before, healthcare, engineering, I don't know, things like that, I gotta imagine that the concentration of people just being jerks to other people because they think they're smarter than them or they want to act smarter than them is more common than in other walks of life in this industry. And it's kind of a bad thing. It's certainly not good for people who want to get into the industry or for people who work in the industry for that matter. I think I can offer a couple tips on how to approach situations when you're getting treated poorly in the industry, and also hopefully offer some advice to any of you who have, and probably all of us have treated someone in a bad way, whether we meant to or not, that they were offended by. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about like the ego, big brain ego thing that people do in finance. So tips on how to stop doing that if you're someone who is treating other people that way. So I want to define a little bit about what I think the problem actually is, and it is people having a big ego, and specifically in terms of knowledge, putting other people down because they think they're less knowledgeable and they know less, or they're not as smart as they are. And it can be direct and indirect. So directly would be things like, you need to learn more about this, or comments in emails or verbally about the other party having less information than you do, or them being less knowledgeable about a certain fact than you are. Or indirectly in just nonverbal communication, the way you treat people, the way you act around the office, or in college was when I was exposed to a lot of this initially. And all of it is bad. None of it is a good thing. It's not good for the person doing it. It's not good for the person receiving it. It's not good for the industry as a whole. I would love if we can get away from this trend at some point and instead be more positive towards one another. Of course, there are people smarter than other people, and of course, there are people with more knowledge than other people. Not every human being on the earth is on a level playing field for everything. So when you're involved in one of those situations, approach it with kindness and understanding on what the specific situation is, and it'll result in the best outcome for both parties, rather than one person having to think they have to prop up their ego for a reason that I'll mention here, and the other person leaving the conversation really put down and upset. So I'm fairly sure, again, without being a psychologist, that the root of this problem is lack of self-esteem. And I don't know where it stems from or anything like that, or how it happens, but it seems to me like the finance bro mentality is guys that want to get on Wall Street, or are in college trying to get a good internship, or they want to get a promotion in their job in the finance industry. And for some reason, because they're less confident in themselves, or they're not totally convinced maybe that they can take on the responsibility, or they know enough to step up to the next tier that they're working for, they feel the need to try to put down their competition. And of course, people talk about the human mentality to put others down to feel better about yourself, and that's the root of this problem. It's a lack of self-confidence that in turn results in trying to put other people down. But it's amplified in the finance industry just because so much of the work we do is not physically building products. It's just transfer of information. So when everything is based on knowledge and information, and that's really the lever that exists, then when you get to the point where you are lacking self-esteem and you feel like you have to put other people down based on what they know, then that lever that you're pulling is the entire job. It becomes really ugly, I think, in the finance industry, and it's also fairly common just because of the dog-eat-dog nature, I guess would be the phrase for it, that you'll see in all types of companies and sectors within finance. I first started to notice this personally in college, working on group projects, and my college was really competitive, or university was really competitive in the GPA grading, so the average across the college had to be relatively low. They didn't want everyone to be getting a 3.8 or 4.0 like a lot of maybe state schools would do. So because of that, you had to beat all your classmates in terms of performance on tests and projects. And so everyone was your competition. And a lot of the projects and homework assignments were assigned in groups. So you were really competing directly against the people you're supposed to be working with, which probably wasn't the best arrangement. And because they wanted to score higher on tests than you and do better on projects and speeches than you did, and also because other people were worried about their own performance, it just led to this really nasty, negative, condescending mentality for a lot of people who felt like they had to put other people down to make themselves feel better and make themselves feel like they had a better chance of scoring those higher GPA numbers or higher test scores. And of course, there are a certain group of people who aren't like that, and they're very, very kind and nice and loving to other people. And it just seemed to me like those were also the people who are the most confident in themselves and not cocky. There are confident people who are cocky and confident people who are not cocky. But you can kind of read both of those types of people, and in either scenario, they usually weren't the ones putting other people down. If they're really cocky, they were just talking about how great they were all the time, which whatever, that's its own thing. But if they were confident and not cocky, then they just seemed like they would help people learn, which is one of the solutions that I think to this problem is, and talk about what they know in relation to what the project is, just to try to better the group. And they did it with kindness and humility, and that of course is a much better scenario than people who are really condescending and rude because they think they're smarter than other people. And then this trend totally carried over into the workforce. In private wealth management where I work, I've heard of one group specifically where all the advisors in the office are like competing against each other in all the offices across the country. That's how this one firm's business model works. And they're just literally all putting each other down and trying to one-up each other in terms of who knows more. In reality, financial advisors are not stock pickers. We're not equity analysts. We're not hedge fund managers. We're not private equity managers. So when it comes to individual investments, we know far less than people who spend 50 hours a week on that job. We spend a lot of time doing a lot of other things. But I think for any advisor to start trying to put another advisor down based on investment recommendations is crazy. But even if you were some type of outstanding genius and you knew more than everyone else in the office, you should approach that situation as a learning opportunity for everyone else and a chance for you to help other people out in the world. It's also worth being said too that kindness does not go unnoticed, and I think a lot of times, sure, there are some jerks that get promoted and get high positions in companies, but a lot of times the people who treat people the best and the people who other people want to work around are the ones that become the most successful. I think that being rude and trying to step on other people to lift yourself up is a really short-term strategy that might work out in the short run, but isn't going to last well for you for very long. Now, I could be a little biased here. I never worked in investment banking, but I think investment banking is where you see this the most, and I don't know why that is. I mean, it's kind of the upper tier of the finance industry, at least in the early years. Maybe that has to do somewhat with the existence of this finance bro, I'm better than you, big ego, put other people down mentality. But whatever it is, man, it just seems to me like for everyone that I know who has worked in banking knows a lot of people like this or has been treated this way. Not everyone who works in banking treats people poorly. Of course, there are a lot of good people that do. It just seems like a higher probability of people who work in banking end up doing this condescending, put down mentality or attitude to other people more so than people in other sectors of finance, and I'm not sure why. If you're considering working in investment banking, keep that in mind. It's certainly a hurdle that you'll have to step over. And so that kind of brings me to my next point, which is how to approach situations like this when you really are being put down by someone else because they're trying to act like or they feel like they know more than you. Just like you want them to approach a scenario with kindness, I think you need to approach the situation with kindness. And the fact that they're being rude to you originally makes it all that much more difficult. So you really have to be the bigger person here. And in some of these cases, you may know less than them and they may be more knowledgeable than you. You're really going to have to put in a lot of effort to continue to be nice to this person who knows more than you and they're making sure they know more than you and they're being rude to you. You just have to do what you can to be as nice as you can in that relationship. And I'm not saying if you're nice to them, then they'll be like, oh, wow, they're really nice and they're going to start being nice to me. No, they might be a jerk forever. But it's just a much better way to live life, and especially to work in the workforce when you're sharing kindness and spreading positivity and love with the people that you spend a lot of time with in the office where you work. There's no easy way to get around it. It can be pretty mentally taxing. You can feel beat up when you have especially multiple people treating you that way. So there's no quick solution. I wish there was a certain magical phrase you could use with people and then they would start treating you right, and that's not the case. So you just have to practice as much as you can, keeping a positive outlook in your own mind, treating them with positivity, and treating other people with kindness around you. And then maybe, after a certain period of time, any kindness that you can share could spread to other people and they could start treating other people better. And then the office you work in could years down the road get to a very good working environment, but I don't want to make any guarantees on that happening anytime soon for you. I'm just saying it's better for you to be kind to them, whether it helps that relationship out in the short term or not. And then if you're someone who treats people this way, even if you don't think you do it all the time, if you know that you do it a little bit, you probably do it more than you think. We're going to go back to the core root here, which is lack of self-confidence. That's a difficult thing to deal with. I've talked to a lot of people and some close friends of mine who have lacked a lot of self-confidence. And whenever they feel like someone is trying to prove them wrong or treating them poorly, right away they get defensive, and defensive also means aggressive, and they start putting that person down, and then that person puts them down again, and it's kind of just a vicious cycle, and none of it is good. So if you're someone who has noticed that you've done this to other people in the past, you have to start with the core problem, which is your lack of self-confidence, and that's not an easy thing to tackle either. So you can always learn from people who do know more than you, or even the people that you've been putting down, getting their perspective on a certain situation. The more you can learn, and the more you can put your ego aside and say, hey, I don't know about this thing. Can you teach me about this thing? While that's difficult to do it in the short term, what it allows you to do is build up more knowledge. And the more knowledge you have and the more comfortable you are with certain topics, or like I kind of mentioned earlier, the more comfortable you are with the idea of potentially moving up in your career and having more responsibilities in the next role, then the more confident you'll be when you are thinking about those types of things. The more confident you are, the less of a need you will feel to put other people down. So I'm not saying that, just study, get more knowledge, then you'll be nice to people. Practicing kindness as a general principle in the way that you work with people for a good period of time, and also being humble and practicing humility and learning as much as you can from people who either know more than you or less than you. Everyone has some information that you don't have. So the more you do that, the more that you'll be able to shape yourself as a kind person and get to the point where you're not creating these toxic relationships anymore, being rude to people that you're around on a day-to-day basis. So, I'm kind of just going off the cuff here. I feel bad for a handful of the people who have reached out to me and asked about situations that they're in where they're dealing with things like that. So I wanted to make the video because I know there are other people out there that deal with it too. I'm not the best person to talk to about this topic. Like I've said a couple times, I'm not a psychologist, but if you can do the things that I'm talking about here, you should be able to improve your scenarios when when dealing with toxic or condescending people towards you. So if that helps anyone at all, then I feel like I did my job here. So thanks for watching.